Afro-descendants, Indigenous, and immigrant communities. And we are here today to say enough. No more partnerships with ICE. This is the year that once and for all, the 287G program that has allowed Maryland to become an extension of ICE. Today, upstairs in the Judicial Proceedings Committee room at 1 p.m., there will be a hearing on Senate Bill 245 to end existing 287G agreements and prevent any other locality from entering into new ones. I want to thank Senator Smith for your leadership, Senator Karen Lewis Young, and Senate President Ferguson for sponsoring this critical legislation. I also want to thank Delegate Williams for her leadership in the House and recognize Chair Martinez, the Latino Caucus of Maryland, for their ongoing leadership. Most importantly, I want to thank the hundreds of thousands of CASA members, our partners, and the community members who have been in the fight for this reform for over a decade. This year, CASA's agenda includes 3 critical priorities to protect immigrant families. First, here today. Second, legislation to prevent law enforcement from assisting and all 3 pieces of legislation work hand in hand. And we look of the federal administration. We have responded as person after person has been brutalized and tortured by ICE and sisters, neighbors, children, and friends against ICE's increasingly violent and lawless actions. But shockingly, we have also seen here in this beautiful, welcoming state that we call home, the number of counties that allow their ICE officers to act as ICE agents through the 287G program grow from 3 counties to 8 counties. Hartford, Cecil, Carroll counties all have these 287G agreements. How can our community trust our local and state officers to protect us and serve us when these very officers are so deeply entangled with ICE? We can't trust them. Now, those who support 287G like to talk about public safety, right? So let's talk about public safety. What they don't tell you is that their crime rates aren't any lower because of their 287G programs. What they don't tell you is that 287G doesn't actually capture criminals. And what they don't tell you is that people are afraid to call the police because of 287G. No, so 287G does not further public safety goals in our community. We know that its true goal is to destabilize Black and brown communities through terror, family separation, and disappearing our loved ones, breadwinners, and caretakers. Keep our families together. We will protect and defend one another. We will ban 287G agreements in the state of Maryland once and for all.
Senator Smith, chairman of the Judicially True in the district that I represent and the district that I grew up in. Immigrants represent 17% of the population here in Maryland, and as you'll hear upstairs, immigrants represent 20% or a little bit more than 21% of our labor force. These residents contribute deeply to our economy and to the fabric of our communities and are deeply connected to every aspect of our daily lives. They enrich our communities. And without veering too much off of the substance of the bill, I have to say that this has been a particularly disorienting period of time in our political culture throughout the nation and here in Maryland. And the pace of it has been head spinning. And the manner in which this administration Assembly over the last few years to restore a once fractured relationship between law enforcement and the communities that they serve, most particularly and most prominently through our efforts of police reform. The 287G program undermines that trust in law enforcement by creating an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust with the community members who may choose to avoid law enforcement for fear of racial profiling and deportation. Since its inception, the 287G program has ensnared individuals for minor infractions like speeding and driving with broken taillights. And now there have been more collateral collections than ever before in our nation's history. According to a recent report and cited by the 2/3 of the 700 Marylanders who were arrested by ICE were never charged with a crime and were never convicted. The manner in which this program has been administered has bypassed due process for tens of thousands of people, most of whom have no longer divert precious resources from our law enforcement from a relentless focus on public safety to immigration and customs enforcement. It's important to note that if an individual has been arrested or is considered to be a threat to themselves or others, they will be detained regardless of their immigration status. It's also important to note that anyone suspected of a crime will be tracked, traced, and held accountable by every element of law enforcement, regardless of their immigration status. So it's my profound privilege to author this legislation and to sponsor this in the Senate, and I look forward to working with my partners to get this important piece of legislation through the Senate and over to the House as soon as possible. Before I conclude and hand it over to my colleague in the House, I want to say thank you to Delegate Martinez, who just walked in, the chair. Good morning. For your work, and to the Latino Caucus work, CASA Maryland, for your work and partnership, and then in particular, Delegate Nicole Williams, who's led this effort, who was a sponsor of this bill last year and returned this year. So with that, I'll hand it off to Delegate Nicole Williams for her remarks.
Thank you, Chair Smith, and thank you so much for everyone being here. I'm Delegate Nicole Williams, and I'm so proud to stand here today, standing with CASA and with our entire community in support of accountability, transparency, public safety, and just basic human decency. As you all know, we're here today because the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, as you heard earlier, will hear this bill this afternoon. And I'll say that the bottom line is that the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee must, and I know that they will, vote this bill out of committee and bring it to the Senate floor. SB 245 basically sunsets and prohibits 287G agreements across the state. And on the House side, I'm so proud to be the sponsor of this bill and proud that they will soon have a hearing in front of the House Judiciary Committee. This legislation comes at a very critical time for our state and for our country. We are watching horrified as this administration beats, abducts, murders people, including American citizens and veterans. Masked men are marching down our streets with weapons, with no accountability for our laws and our rights as Americans. So let me just say that people who look like me know what happens when masked men demand papers and start abducting people in the streets. And so today we are here to say, not here in Maryland. We will not allow the masking of law enforcement or the participation of these ICE programs anymore. SB 245, which I'm carrying our neighbors and our community. And so today is the time for us to act. 5 counties here in the state of Maryland have enacted these agreements, almost tripling what existed just at the beginning of last year. And so now is our time to stamp this out and to get our local police back to solving local problems and local crimes. It is time for Maryland and the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee to advance this bill and to reaffirm our values as Americans and their work, and most importantly, from this administration. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I was going to say, I know I'm not in here by myself. I am Maryland State Delegate Ashanti Martinez. I have the honor and privilege of this legislative session. I believe really deeply that we have a responsibility to do everything that we can for the most vulnerable among us. And in this moment, we are doing something for our neighbors, our immigrant neighbors who are consistently under a relentless attack from this federal administration. An attack that is predicated on the fact that they had an agenda. They had a plan on how they wanted to whitewash this country. And let me be very clear, there is no other way you can look at the actions of this administration and be clear about our intentions, about who we are as a state. Trump and his allies are going to be who they are, we have a responsibility in Maryland to be who we are. And since 1632 in our founding, we have been a welcoming state, a state that folks can come and seek refuge. That's why we're the fourth most diverse state in the country and one of the most diverse states on the East Coast. That's not a coincidence, that is by consequence, because we have always had policies that welcome folks to our shores. Let me be very clear that Legislative Latino Caucus is still in support of this vital piece of legislation and have been since our inception. We have consistently fought since 2015 to make sure that we have dignity, not detention, to make sure that we have ICE out of Maryland. These are priorities to keep our communities whole, because we truly believe that personhood, not status, is what really brings and drives your value. The beautiful tapestry that we see in this room is because of the diversity that we have here in Maryland and us being a welcoming state. There's a lot of press corps across the country, and you all know that don't look like this room. And we have that here in Maryland because of who we are at our core. I'm so very excited of the champions that we have in Senator Smith as well as Delegate Williams, both associate members and valued members of the Latino Caucus. Our caucus is 92 members strong because of the work we do with allied partners. Think of two better champions to make sure that our neighbors are protected. So I just thank you all for being here today. I look forward to watching the hearing. I look forward to the Senate moving the bill across the street, and I look forward to us in the House passing this bill for a third time this term. Thank you.
Wow. I always wake up every morning and I say to myself, it is a great day to fight for immigrant rights. It is a great day to fight for immigrant rights, and it is a great day to pass this bill. So thank you, Chair Smith, Delegate Williams, Chair Martinez, for your leadership once again. Our next speaker is Yanette Emanuel, the Policy Director at the ACLU of Maryland. Yanette, please come on up.
Good morning, my name is Yanette Emanuel, Public Policy Director for the ACLU of Maryland and also a proud immigrant from Eritrea. Our local resources should strengthen our communities, not help ICE tear them apart. Programs like 287G are designed to turn local police into a national deportation force. They expand federal power into our neighborhoods, our jails, and our daily lives. We know the facts. Deputizing local law enforcement through 287G does not make communities safer. It undermines public trust, and with no criminal history or those charged with only minor offenses into the deportation pipeline. Nationally, 76% of individuals detained or deported under 287G had no criminal convictions. We also know that 287G does not reduce crime. Maryland counties without 287G are seeing stronger crime reductions than those with it. Since 2021, Baltimore City has seen a 59% drop in homicides. In 2024, Montgomery County saw a 7% drop in overall crime compared to Frederick County, which has had a 287G agreement since 2008 and has only seen a 4% drop in overall crime. State and local agencies that join the enforcement spree risk lawsuits that could cost municipalities millions in damages. As the Maryland Attorney General noted in a 2025 guidance, compared to their federal counterparts, state and local officers face more significant exposure to civil lawsuits or for violations of federal or state law. Frederick County, for example, paid a $125,000 settlement in 2021 after sheriff deputies stopped Sarah Medrano for nothing but driving while Latina. That risk is the reason that states like Maine and Delaware have recently joined New Jersey, Connecticut, Illinois, Washington, Oregon, and California in rejecting 287G. And why here in Maryland, Anne Arundel County officials withdrew their proposal.
Much, Yanette, and thank you to the ACLU of Maryland for your speaker. Will be Stephanie Wolf, the Director of the Immigration Unit of the Maryland Office of the Public Defender. Stephanie, please come on up.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We all want to live in a safe community. But 287G agreements do nothing to make us safer. They simply make it convenient for ICE to arrest more of us at the cost of our commitment to justice and due process. These agreements, either before they've had their day in court or after their cases ended with no 280s, And a few days later, that man was arrested in a neighboring county that has a 287G agreement. Now, he was almost immediately released because this is a very minor charge. But instead of going home to his family, he was held for ICE. There was never any consideration of his guilt or innocence. There was never any consideration of whether it is a good idea to help separate a family based on a lapsed insurance card. And that is what 287G does. Once someone is arrested, no matter why, and no matter what happens after that, what ICE says goes. Local law enforcement has no choice but to put the person into the deportation pipeline. And this is true even if local law enforcement knows the person to be a US citizen, as Sheriff Jenkins admitted when I asked him this summer. Doing ICE's work for them undermines due process, and it doesn't help make us safe. Over 7 years of the 287G program in Maryland, for every one 287G detainer placed on a person with a serious violent conviction, there were 115 detainers placed on people with no conviction at all. That's because these agreements only target people coming out of a local jail, while people convicted of serious violent crimes tend to go to the State Department of Corrections and be released from there. What 287G does do, it doesn't keep us safe, but what it does do is allow ICE to use our legal system as a force multiplier, freeing up their agents, their detention space, and their resources to make even more arrests on our streets. Data from around the country shows that states with more 287G agreements have more total ICE arrests overall, and they have more ICE arrests in the community. Our cooperation does not just shift the location of arrest from the community to the jail, as the proponents of 287G sometimes claim. Instead, it simply expands ICE's capacity to make more arrests at Maryland's expense. If we use our personnel and resources to process and hand over any non-citizen who has the misfortune of being arrested, regardless of what they were arrested for, and regardless of whether they are guilty or innocent, ICE uses its resources to take more of us from other places. This does not make us safer. It erodes due process, it endangers our neighbors, and it undermines our values. I look forward to the Senate's vote to end 287G, to the House's vote to do the same, and to Governor Moore's signature. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for your words, and thank you for all that you do to defend our community members. Our final speaker today will be Reverend Kevin Slayton, pastor at Northwood Apple Church in Baltimore. Reverend, please come on.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I am indeed a pastor of a church, and unfortunately for many of you, we may not have it on Sunday, so you're gonna get it today.
There we go.
Policies are not just laws. They shape whether families live in fear, whether they live in safety, stability, trauma, or as we're seeing, whether or not they live or die. Justice is not an idea. Justice is a choice. If you don't believe me, go to chapter 2, verse 8 and verse 7 of the Gospel of Matthew, where we see the first evidence of ICE being implemented to take over folks who look black and brown. Verse 8 simply says, "And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search diligently for the young child. And when you find him, bring me word again that I may come and worship him also." 287G works under the same camouflage. Go find them and bring them to me so I can bring them to justice. But justice is not an idea to my Jesus justice lovers. Justice is a choice. The Bible says in Amos that you ought to love mercy and what? Do justice. The thing I love about this story, for those of you who know it, whether you're Christian or not, is those men who decided to do justice, by the end of the story, they were no longer called magi. At the end of this bill, 245, known as wise men and women.
Well, I feel like I went to church. Thank you so much, Reverend. The collection plate, that's right. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of our speakers. Look, it really is with your partnership that we have been able to get this far, and we are going to get it across the finish line. We can and we will end 287G in the state of Maryland. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Se puede.
Sí se
Se
puede.
puede.
Sí se 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 puede. Woo! Thank you all. Listen, we are going to take some questions now. We have Chair Smith with us for a few more minutes. I know that we can go a little bit past 11:30. So please, if you have any questions, yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Morgan Ford, right of Maryland Matters. I was going to ask this, but the Reverend actually jogged my mind, and I said, you know what? No. Some of the sheriffs were here this week. One of them said, this is Hartford, I'm going to use names because it's right here. Hartford County Sheriff Jeffrey Gollard had this message for anyone that is Black, Latino, and any person of color. If you don't want to get caught up in the 287G program, don't sell drugs, don't break the law, and you won't get arrested, and you won't get screened. End quote. Simple question. Are you saying that in where you live in Maryland? Basically, they say it's not going on in Maryland, but we're seeing it in Minneapolis and other parts of the country.
I'm not. Can you rephrase? Yes. Can you please rephrase and I'll make sure it's passed.
Basically,
Yes.
are you saying what's going on in other parts of the country? You're seeing some of these people being taken in.
Absolutely, but yes, I will pass that on.
So I represent the district, within my district, is the city of Hyattsville. And a couple months ago, I'm sure all of you saw the video of the gentleman who was apprehended by ICE during morning rush hour in the middle of an intersection during broad daylight near a school where children were on their way walking to school. There hasn't been any evidence that that gentleman was out selling drugs at around 8 o'clock in the morning. There hasn't been any evidence that that person was engaging in any type of criminal activity at the moment in which ICE engaged him in the middle of that intersection. So I guess I'm just not really clear what the sheriff is getting at in his comment, because the instances, and I'm just using that one as an example, and the other stories that I've heard within my own district and in my own community are not reports of individuals engaging in crime activity as they're being apprehended by ICE. They're not stories of individuals who are distributing drugs at the moment when they are being apprehended by ICE. So that's not the reality that I've seen or witnessed or I've heard from my constituents. And so that's what I wanted to respond to that.
That statement, the sheriff's statement, bypasses the fundamental principle of due process. Just because you're arrested does not mean that you are guilty of a crime. And I preside over a committee that's responsible for creating crimes in the state of Maryland. Today in the United States, there are more people under lifetime supervision than there were under correctional supervision in the entire country 50 years ago. So we incarcerate a lot of people in this country. We arrest even more. But the fundamental principle of due process seems to have slipped in that statement.
Chair Smith, so last year there seemed apprehension from the Senate because they were kind of fearful of what could happen from the Trump administration if this bill had gone through, the 287G. Now there are a number of bills that target immigration and ICE enforcement. Is there concern from the Senate side that this could spark, retribution from the Trump administration in Maryland, and we could see more targeted enforcements than we already are seeing, like the ones in Minneapolis, or now they're going to Maine, it sounds like?
I've said this several times before. In the Senate caucus, there was, I think, the principled and rightful concern of what would happen if we passed some of these pieces of legislation. That came out of a place of wanting to protect our immigrant community for fear of retribution. But since then, if you look at Medicaid, you look at STAP, you look at funding for the Francis Scott Key Bridge, you look at all the things under this asymmetric presidency, they've all happened. And so, as I've said, I've been clear and consistent throughout the entire time that this bill's been before us, is that we need to ensure values into law and into the Constitution when necessary, like we did with the right to choose, because you can't control what someone else is going to do. You've got to live up to your values and enshrine them in the law.
Senators?
Sheriff's departments have also argued that if you pass this and Maryland no longer partners with ICE within our jails, because the 287G is only within detention centers, they've said that then ICE would send more officers out to our streets. So wouldn't that be counterproductive to your mission of keeping innocent communities safe?
So I don't know, who knows that? That's an unknown, it's a known unknown. We don't know that it's gonna happen, but you look what happened in Virginia, the governor signed an executive order doing the same thing that we're gonna do in the law here today. You have not seen a surge of ICE officers into Virginia. Again, I go back to, you cannot rely on what this president will or will not do. You've got to enshrine your values into our law and live up to the core values of our state.
Sticking with the, oh, I'm so sorry.
I was gonna say, probably, our colleague at OBG might also be able to share some of this.
So I think the other response to that is that that's not what the data shows. There's data about which states have lots of 287G agreements around the country, and the states with more 287G agreements have more ICE arrests overall, and they have more ICE arrests in their communities, meaning not at a jail. So what that shows is that it's not that there's some fixed number of arrests that's gonna happen, and Maryland gets to decide, does it happen at a jail or does it happen on the street? If you partner with them, do their work for them in the jails, there will be more ICE on the streets, there will be more arrests overall.
Sticking with the sheriffs, I believe someone said at the Republican caucus press conference the other day that they're confused how the legislature potentially take away the decision-making process for a duly elected official. Are there concerns that if this bill passes, if it's signed by the governor, that there will be a challenge?
I just did some research on this. Look, I mean, obviously, sheriffs are constitutional officers, so they have common law power, but they are creatures of the state. We are a charter system of government in Maryland. And so while they do have responsibilities and powers vested in them through their status as a constitutional officer, the legislature can curtail them. The department that the sheriff presides over is also a creature of the state. And so the state can also curtail those responsibilities and those rights. So it's fully constitutional. There's several cases that we can rely upon to prove that. Last time litigated in 1982.
Yes, ma'am.
Last year, there was a lot of conversation when you were testifying, Delegate Williams, about clean bill versus what was proposed as a more moderated version of the initial bill that was passed. My understanding is this one is a clean bill, it's a clean break. Can you explain the difference between some of the conversation last year versus what you're proposing this year?
Yeah, sure. I think this is part of just kind of the larger conversation that Senator Smith had mentioned. Also thinking about last year, ways to partner and work with the federal administration. And so I think that was one of the reasons why there were some other provisions that were put in the bill last year in a way to kind of address the desire of the state as a whole to work with the federal administration. Since then, over the last year, we have seen that regardless of what we do as a state, this federal administration does not have any desire to work collaboratively with us. As was stated earlier by Chair Smith, we believe that the clean bill is the best bill from a legal standpoint to enact. And so that is what we are moving forward with, both in the House and the Senate.
Just for clarification's sake, in Maryland, the 287G agreements, there are a number of models of
Yes.
these things. In Maryland, is the only model being used currently the jail enforcement model?
We have both the jail enforcement model and the warrant enforcement model here in the state of Maryland. Those are the two models that we have that currently exist.
What counties are enforcing the warrant model?
I believe some of the newer counties, I'll let,
Sure, yes. So the warrant service officer models are currently being implemented by Carroll County, Garrett County, St. Mary's, Washington, and Allegheny County. And those are all of those came online, right, after January 2020. And I do also want to make very clear, right, this isn't about whether or not one model might be safer for the community. All of them should be outlawed. They are all detrimental and harmful to the community. And what we've seen recently too is the federal administration just added a fourth model, right? So who knows what other model they will come up with tomorrow. So the safest point to protect all of us is to just outlaw it completely and make sure that no new 287G agreements, regardless of model, can be started in this state. Any additional questions? Yes, sir.
So, in the time that I've been covering the legislature, when a bill has the support of the Speaker and the President, it's pretty much as good as done. It's going to get through. Is that something you guys are feeling, that this bill to ban 287G agreements in the state of Maryland is pretty much done, and we just have to see how it gets to the finish line?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to have the support of both the presiding officers on both of these pieces of legislation. We're still gonna go through the legislative process. We're still gonna have the committee hearings. We're gonna still have robust debate within the community, within the committees, as well as on the House and Senate floor. And so, but it is, you know, I do welcome the confidence that Madam Speaker has with regards to myself and with others, with Martinez and others who are sponsoring this bill. She was a sponsor of this legislation last year, and so, you know, it's wonderful to have both of the presiding officers support.
No, I'll just say, I thank the Senate President for his leadership on this issue. We've been, you know, this has been before the General Assembly for several years. I think has reflected deeply and has lent his support, and it means everything. So, tremendously proud to serve in the Senate and happy for his support.
And with Maryland having some of the longest 287G agreements in the country, if not the longest, I'm just curious, does this legislation feel particularly monumental in any way, or do you feel any extra responsibility as, you know, coming out as one of the states with one of the longest, potentially banning these 287G agreements? How does it make the lawmakers feel?
I don't know if it's about duration of the agreements, but more so kind of the moment that we're in right now. This is one of those pivotal moments, I think, in our history as a country, where what we're seeing is unprecedented. And I think the way that we all respond is going to be in history books for our children and grandchildren to read about in the future. And so I think it's important that in this moment that we stand up for what we believe in, we values, and we protect everyone within our community, because this is it's just this moment that we are in. You know, whether or not, you know, the fact that in Frederick County, which is one of the counties here in the state that enacted one of these agreements, is irrelevant. I think what's relevant is that we're going to act now. We've been trying to do this for a number of years here in this state, and that this moment calls for this action.
I have one more quick, just clarifying question about the data that was cited. Several of you had talked about the vast majority of people that are deported because of the 287G program, that they don't have criminal history. Where that research is coming from?
So there are two different sources for that data, or at least two different sources. One is the transactional or records access clearinghouse, and there's a citation in the link in my written testimony, which is publicly available now. And there's also FOIA data through the Deportation Data Project, which is, I believe, out of the University of California.
Okay, so is it Maryland specific and 287G specific?
You can break it down both by state and by the program.
Okay, and when you do that, what is the percentage?
So the percentage is complex to determine, because the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse data is 2016 to 2023. ICE changed the way they reported the data in their most recent FOIA release, so this is it sort of stops at 2023. But it was, I believe, 0.5% was the percentage that had been convicted of what they had called a level 1 crime, which is the most serious, serious violent crimes. 0.5. Yeah, one. And so that's how we get that the data that I cited of one person with a detainer, with a serious violent crime detainer, to 115 with no conviction at all. And there's a chart in my written testimony with the rest of the percentages.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you all of you. Are there any final questions? Or any final words from our speakers? Okay, well, with that, I think we will go ahead and wrap, right? We really hope that you'll tune in at 1 p.m. for this historic moment. It said very well earlier, the time is now. I'm sure all of you saw, I think it was just yesterday, officially a homicide out of an ICE detention center, right? And this is also the highest number of deaths that have been reported by ICE since 2004, I believe. Our community members are literally being killed by ICE every single day, and we must make sure that we are not contributing to that. So the time is now to end 287G. With that, I say thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you to our speakers, and we will see you all at 1 p.m.